we're going to ask her some policy questions, and we're going to ask you to keep it pretty policy focused. What I'd ask you to do is start out by giving us a sense of your policy credentials. That is, what your experience brings to the table in terms of helping you, be a smart member of the board from a policy perspective. Okay, and then what I'd like you to do is give me that, and in the same opening minute, please, give me your top 3 issues. Don't give me any explanation of details. I just want the bullet point of what the topic is, so that I can see how it's going to sort out. So I can see where the commonalities are of issues that you guys don't have. We obviously, as you might imagine, have our own issues that we want to discuss. So Barbara, you want to go first?
Certainly. So to answer your policy question and what I bring to this board and this opportunity is 20 years of experience as a board member, setting policy, watching our finances, as well as what we deliver to the public. And on top of that, meeting regulatory expectations and obligations for our wastewater treatment. We set policy regarding our household hazardous waste facility, our recycled water program. We also set a new policy supporting the pharmacy drop-off program.
Yeah, I just want to know your experience.
My experience?
That you bring to the table. We can talk about various issues in a little bit.
Okay.
But your background experience. Don't worry about Steve. I know it's kind of weird, but what are the So you've been on the board 20 years. Are there other considerations, training, background, where you should keep in mind?
Oh.
Expertise.
Fabulous. Okay. If you want to know my background, I have a bachelor's in nursing and a master of science in education. And so when I was first asked to run for this board 20 years ago, I took a look at what the sanitary district did, because I had no idea. And I felt that at that point in time, my background in nursing and teaching nursing had a direct relationship to public health, which is the reason why we have wastewater treatment in the first place. We were also at that point in time franchising garbage, which I felt was also in the best interest of not only our environment, but public health. So I found that thread throughout the 20 years that I've served on this board.
Okay, and let me just also ask you, what are your 3 top topics? Don't want an explanation, just what are them?
My 3 focused areas are protecting the public health and the environment, maintaining existing assets, and also preparing a workforce and a plant for the future.
I'm Rick Clark. I've been in the county since '74. I've been on the County Planning Commission 23 years this month. My background, I have a degree in English literature. I have an MBA in finance and a law degree. I taught for about 25 years as an adjunct law and finance and accounting. I think the most important asset I bring, or qualification I bring, is...
Where did you teach?
Finance.
Yeah, where did you
I was
teach?
adjunct at several universities, most primarily the University of Phoenix, and I was a regent at John F. Kennedy University for several years.
Okay.
And I think the most important qualification I bring is 23 years on the Planning Commission, where I learned about the county and how to serve the county's needs, balance the need for more infrastructure with the need for the protection of the environment, and how to deal with the political pressures that are brought to bear on decision makers.
So what are your top 3?
Well, number 1 is protection of the environment. Number 2 is to a real sore spot with me is to do away with opportunities for abuse of the pension system. The emphasis being on the word abuse. And I think also I like to have a, if I can, and if it doesn't already exist, have a framework for all of the stakeholders involved to have a meaningful say in decisions that are made. So,
what does that mean?
It means that if you're a ratepayer, or you're a labor union, or a worker, or a vendor, or someone to whom services are provided, like Ross Moore, Concord, that you ought to have an active opportunity to have a say in the decisions that are before the board.
Okay, so protection of the environment, doing away with abuse of the pension system, and framework for all stakeholders to have a voice.
Stakeholder involvement to me is very important.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Paul.
Morning. My name is Paul Causey, and my background, I think, strongly resembles what work Central San actually is doing.
Just talk to me. Forget about that.
Has been involved in over the years. I graduated in 1970 from Santa Clara University with a BS in mechanical engineering. I then later got an MS in civil engineering from UC Berkeley, and my entire career of 42 years has been involved in both municipal and local government responsibilities. I have a very broad background in everything from general management, having been the manager of 2 sanitation districts, sanitary districts here in the area for a long time.
Delta Diablo, and what was the other
Delta
one?
Diablo and the Orloma Sanitary District. I also served as interim general manager of 2 districts in Marin County for short periods of time. But my entire 42-year career has been engaged with municipal and local governments at all levels, from the engineering aid all the way up through and including all capital planning, all water and wastewater planning, management, negotiations. I've negotiated from both sides of the table. I represented the Milpitas Employees Association back many years ago, and I've also been on the other side of the table for 20 years in management of districts and negotiating directly not only with Local 1 but also with AFSCME over in Alameda County.
Paul, are you currently retired?
I am retired but have my own consulting firm at which I work approximately half-time, providing management consulting services to municipal agencies in California.
But you are not, okay, so 2 questions. One, do you have contracts with the district?
I do not.
Have you sought contracts with the district?
I have not.
Okay. And second question, just so we're clear, are you clearly retired from the public sector?
I am, yes.
Okay. And I presume you are drawing some sort of pension from which system?
I'm drawing a pension from the Public Employees Retirement System and from the Contra Costa County Retirement System.
Okay, so you're drawing pensions from PERS and Cicera?
That's correct.
Okay, go ahead, I'm sorry.
So my entire career I've really spent managing districts, understanding the water and wastewater business from the ground up. I have extensive experience both in management and organizational evaluation, staffing levels, and organization operations. I have been an extensive background in asset management of infrastructure, and I've spent 35 years doing rate and rate evaluations for all the agencies I've been engaged with.
Okay, so what are your 3 issues?
My 3 issues for this particular election are involved dealing with pension and benefit issues, which are currently significant at the district. Currently, over 50% of the total labor budget for the district is involved in pensions and health and welfare benefits. My second issue deals with staff. The district has had significant turnover in the last 9 months, and they expect some additional turnover in the next 3 or 4 months. They will have less than 30%, or they will have more than about 30% of their staff will have turned over in the last year and a half or so. And so there's a significant staff issue in terms of bringing new people in, moving people up in the organization, and training and education is going to be a hugely important issue at all levels of the organization.
And what's your 3rd issue?
The 3rd issue deals with the question of rates and rates into the future and how those rates can be sustainable in the asset management world that we currently exist. So asset management and rate evaluation.
Hi, my name's Jim Nedgley. I'm running for Central Sand. That's why we're here today. I've been on the board for almost 16 years. When I originally got on the board, I was at the urging of my father, who was in political life for the majority of his career. And at first I was a little bit hesitant, but after some soul searching, and at the time when he suggested I do it, he said I'd be a good fit at Central Sand because of the background that I have then and going now through my career. I graduated from St. Mary's. I worked in the transportation industry for 5 years. I currently do still some transportation, but manage a very large site in Pittsburgh with upwards of 100 employees. And I've been...
You're working now for?
Caravan Enterprises.
Still working, okay.
Yes. And I've always had a mechanical background, whether it be working at a kids camp, or we were the family that never hired anybody to do anything. So it fit with that structurally. My dad thought it would be a good idea because of my age at the time. The majority of people on the boards were older, and he thought I'd bring a little breath of fresh air, which I think I have over the years. I don't know that I ever thought I'd be here for 16 years running for the 5th term, but here I am because once you get involved, at least I do feel like I'm doing some good and trying to make the district run as good as possible. My 3 items, I'd have to say, there's twofold. You always are looking out for the ratepayers because they're the ones that are footing the bill for the district. We as policymakers sometimes get into a little more policy because you've got 5 members on the board running a district that's very large, has a large capital and O&M expenses, and you're one of them. I live in the district, obviously. I pay the sewer service fee, and it's on my tax bill, and I, like everybody else, am doing that. And I think that's why a lot of people that run for these boards, including myself, are trying to look out for the ratepayers.
So what are your 3 issues?
Ratepayers, public safety and the environment, and a good working environment for our employees. And that's where I was going to go next, was that...
Okay, well, we'll come back to this elaboration. I just need the
Okay.
topic points. And
Sure.
Public safety and the environment, and something about the
Good working environment for
Good
the
working
employees.
environment. Okay. Sorry, I just wasn't taking
No, it's
notes.
fine.
Okay. Ratepayers, rates in the future, pension abuse, maintaining existing assets. I think there's a financial theme here that ran through each of your, there was at least one of each of your 3 top points for all of you in one way or another. Let me start with you, Jim. Give me your assessment of the financial situation with the district.
I think the financial situation of the district is except for our unfunded liabilities with pension, which we're dealing with now, is the district's in good financial position, being lower 3rd for rates throughout the Bay Area. Even with our ad valorem tax, we're 9th out of 23, and without it, we're 6th. So there are other districts that get subsidized by other means, like garbage rates. They control the garbage, as Barbara indicated earlier. And I think we're doing a very good job, but as Paul indicated, that we do have a retirement issue, and we're trying to hit it head on to the point of straightening it out. It can be called abuse on some terms, but in other terms, it's so complicated, and I know Dan's been dealing with this for a long time, is that to try to simplify it and understand it and know how it works and how Cicero rules work, to apply them, and that's our main goal right now, is to straighten that out.
Paul.
The finances of the district are in good shape today. I think, however, going forward with the changes in regulation, with the challenges from ratepayers with regard to doing more with less, and the challenges of the pension reform. Really, at this stage, I think the future needs to be looked at very carefully in order to make sure that rates are sustainable, that rates are reasonable and fair. I know that there are going to be changes from a regulatory standpoint that are going to increase the cost of doing business. Currently, however, the district, 71% of their budget is made up of labor and benefits. And that only leaves about 30% left for the general operation and running of the district. We need to take a look at that, and those balances of the 71%, over half of that is associated solely with benefits. And I think we need to take a look at those issues and try to understand why that number is so high. In my experience, that's a very high number compared to the labor component of cost. And so we really need to take a look at that. With the change in the staffing currently and with the retirements that have taken place over the last 6 months and will happen in the next 3 or 4 months, it's a unique opportunity to really look at the organization and decide what the right staffing level should be going forward that will affect future retirement and pension obligations and responsibilities, and hopefully drive down somewhat the comparison of labor cost to benefit cost.
So you want to drive down, give me that again?
In most organizations that I've been involved with over time, the benefits and health costs of the district tend to be between 50 and 60%. At Central San, they are 100% of labor costs, the salary component. And that's a very high number.
You know that you're saying the benefit costs match the salary?
That's correct.
Okay.
And benefit includes pension and health and welfare and PERB and those things. And those costs are high in my experience. And so we want to take a look at those and better understand how we can make those costs a smaller proportion of the total budget. And
that is those costs being benefit costs.
Benefit costs, that's correct. But we have to do it in a way to remain competitive in the industry, to continue to have good employees at the district, continue to have fair and reasonable benefits and salary for the employees. And that's going to be a real job and a real tough situation in order to do in the current environment. Because I know ratepayers clearly are interested in doing more with less dollars.
Rick?
Ari?
Your
okay.
Financial analysis of the financial status of the district?
If there wasn't going to be a vacancy on the board, if the 3 spaces available were being taken by incumbents who were running again, I wouldn't be running, because the board has done a very good job in the past of managing the district, both in terms of the services it delivers, the rates that it has been forced to charge ratepayers, very low, and the financial health of the district going forward. But there is going to be a vacancy, and so I'm hoping to fill that seat.
Okay. My question has to do with the financial stability.
I think the financial stability right now is very good. It's not a crisis situation. I mentioned in the first statement that I was interested in preventing pension abuse, and that's a very important. It just seems some of the abuses that are occurring, which are all within the letter of the collective bargaining agreement, should not be available going forward. But let me make it clear, if somebody worked for the district in the past under a particular plan, that plan shouldn't be pulled out from under them, sometime before they retire. But going forward, it ought to be a fair, rich package for the employees, but it ought not to be subject to abuse. But the board has done a good job.
What do you mean by that?
Excuse me?
What do you mean a fair, rich package?
It ought to be a package that gives dignity to the people who come to work, that attracts highly qualified people, and it retains highly qualified people. The district is, like most organizations, is very, I guess, dependent on having people who come to work every day. The board's important, of course, but the board's primary job is to ensure the sustaining financial condition of the district, and to make sure that happens, you need good quality people at all levels, and you need to be fair with them and pay them well.
Do you think
while
they're
keeping,
not being paid well right now?
I don't No, I don't think that. I think in some situations their compensation, especially on the benefit side, is excessive. For people who are retiring, and I'm primarily talking about spiking. A lot of good, hard-working people there that deserve to be treated well, to get fair compensation. It would be great if we could keep the rates in the bottom third and our pay in the top third.
Well, I'm going to agree that the financial status of the district is actually awesome. We pay as you go. We cover our debts.
You pay as you go. What does that mean?
That means that we have money in the bank, money in our reserves for our 10-year capital plan, and that money stays there until it's used. And the way we collect our money is from the tax rolls. So you will find that when we get our tax payments off of the tax rolls, it comes in 2 increments, December and was it April? Okay, so in that type of a budget, you have a huge investment in your budget, but then you'll have it wane in the center. That's why you need to keep a certain amount of reserves available, because you never want those lines to cross. You always want to have money available for the project.
I understand what you're saying about cash flow, but cash flow, frankly, is just a smoothing out process. Okay? Can you address the broader financial stability? I'm not really interested in how the cash flow is managed.
Okay.
Okay?
So, the board is just completing the negotiation of a new labor agreement. And our goal is to absolutely eliminate spiking. And the way we intend to do that is to eliminate the cashing out of our vacation and our sick time. Because according to the CICERA calculation document, that is how spiking occurs. Our employees save it. They save their vacation, they save their sick time. And it essentially is used as a bank to spike their pensions for the rest of their lives. So our goal is to reduce that opportunity by 26 to 38% and eliminate that. And when we do that, we're going to start to save $12 million to reduce the pension costs.
$12 million over what? What does that number represent?
Eliminating the cash and the cash payment.
Is that on an annualized basis? Is that the unfunded liability? What's that $12 million?
It's the unfunded liability. We will watch it start to decline.
So you'll start to reduce it.
Absolutely.
You won't hit the $12 million, but it'll be over time.
That's right.
Okay.
We also intend to ask our employees to pick up their pension contribution, which is 6.5% over 5 years.
Okay.
We have also agreed to pay their health care benefits because we believe that a healthy employee is one that's going to come to work and have an increased level of productivity. We also care about our employees, and to ask new employees, young employees with families to pick up the entire burden of the health care portion is extremely difficult.
To ask the employees to pick up the entire burden of the health. Well, right now they're not picking up any part of the health care.
That's true.
So there's a long ways in between. What are you saying there?
I'm saying that currently we're going to reduce their pensions by 26 to 38%, and in labor negotiations...
No, that's not what you said. You were going to reduce the spiking by 28 to 36%.
That's right. Well,
that's not reducing their pensions by 28 to 38%.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is, because they can use that time and that money as cash out before to spike their pensions. Now, when you eliminate the opportunity to cash out, they can't do that.
Okay, so you're saying the cash out is increasing their pensions by 28 to 38%.
Absolutely.
Okay, so what you're saying is you're going to do away with the spiking portion.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Which is going to impact our employees immensely, because people who have worked for our district for 10 years or more, are going to have to now realize that their future is being compromised in terms of banking on their pension. And because I owe my responsibility not only to my ratepayers, but also to my employees during the labor negotiation process, this is what we essentially are talking about, so that we can preserve the integrity of our employees as well as reduce our unfunded liability.
Barbara, what portion, what percentage of every dollar of payroll goes to pensions? From the district? For every dollar you pay in payroll, how much do you put towards pensions?
I don't know if I have that number.
Anyone know?
It's $12 million approximately of.
Do you know what that
about
works out to?
$48 million of labor costs.
Is it 19% of our budget?
That's about right.
Do you know what it works out as pensions?
It's 19.8% of our budget.
So it'd be about 19 cents on every dollar.
$110 million of unfunded pension liability.
Okay. Here, let's talk about some numbers here. And let me start with Barbara and Jim, because you guys are the long-term incumbents. Here are the numbers. Your pensions are 61 cents on the dollar. For every dollar you pay in salary, you pay an additional 61 cents in pension costs. On top of that, you pay full medical coverage. Employees pay nothing. You currently have started to fund your retiree health, paying the full annual amount, which you haven't been for years, so you have a huge unfunded liability there. You have an unfunded liability between pensions and retiree health of somewhere in the neighborhood of, I believe it's 180 million. It might be more. I'm trying to remember the exact figure here. And pension is 109, and retiree health, when you add them both up, it's about $190 million. That equals roughly 3 years of your operation and maintenance costs, just in your unfunded liability. It works out to about $1,150 per household in the district. You're looking at rates right now that, if you start to address this problem, will double in the next 10 years. So I guess my question, starting with the two incumbents, is how do we get here, and why should we have confidence in you? You guys have been there a long time. Start with you,
Sure.
Jim.
Why do you have confidence? Why have confidence in us? We're not the only ones in this situation. A lot of these unfunded liabilities, as Barbara said, we've been pay-as-you-go forever, and we build those into the rates. And as so many
Pay-as-you-go.
Okay, pay-as-you-go meaning holding no debt, and other
You
than
do have $190 million
I understand that,
of
and
debt.
now we do. And what
So
else?
you haven't been pay-as-you-go.
Well, no, not since the unfunded liability bomb got dropped on everybody. So as we've been doing since we found out is to address that problem by doing some of the things that Barbara had mentioned, by having employees pay their own portion of the retirement, addressing the post-retirement benefits and salaries.
So when you say having employees pay their portion of the retirement, how much would that be?
6.5%.
An additional 6.5%, right?
Yeah.
Because they're currently paying 4%. Correct. So you would bring it up to 10? Okay. That would still leave you guys with 55 cents on the dollar. Is that acceptable?
No, I don't think 55 cents, but I think during these negotiations that's a start. And I don't think that to hit the employees with that substantial amount of reduction of what they've been getting is appropriate to do.
Okay, so let me ask you then, you guys kind of got into this mess. Why should we have confidence you're going to get us out of this mess?
Okay, well, when you say you guys,
You've been on the board how many years?
15 years.
You've been on the board 20.
Yes, Dan.
That's what I mean.
I understand, and I'll address that, Dan. These rules with retirement were done before my time. This has been status quo for a very long time. We have 3 tiers now at the district over the years. One of, I think it was 85 or 95.
Was there an unfunded liability when you came on the board?
I don't know that. I don't know the answer to that. So they were done before my time.
Barbara?
Actually, Jim's right. The labor negotiations at the Sanitary District have been occurring in the early 70s, and I came on the board in, I think, 92. And the frequency of labor negotiations has probably been held every, 3, 4, 5 years, so there probably have been 4 opportunities during my tenure to take a look at this. However, it was only the past 3 or 4 years where we started to peel back the information that actually we never knew about, and that was the CSERA portion of the calculation for pensions. You see, because at Central San, we're responsible for setting aside money for our OPEB obligations as well as retirement. But the board was never aware of the CSERA calculations and also there was never a policy decision made that someone at our district could forward the saved sick time and vacation time that was used to calculate those pension dollars. So, in my experience, I didn't see that whole other part of the equation for pension payouts because that was CSERA's business. So I have to be honest with you, I am absolutely responsible for knowing all of this. However, I'm also delivered information as a board member to set policy. And that information came to light only 3 or 4 years ago, and it was actually due to Dan Bornstein's investigations. And I was really grateful for seeing that and understanding what the financial responsibility was for our district. And it's at that time my goal was, in the nearest labor negotiations that came up, to deal with it. And that's why we started to work on this last year in November by becoming more educated and also more knowledgeable. We questioned CSERA's calculations. We questioned depooling because what that did was flip over, what was it, $71 million into our bucket of unfunded pension.
Do you think depooling was a bad idea?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Why?
Because, well, it ends up that CSERA actually never could tell us the funds that we had deposited and what we could look forward to. And another issue is that every time we would ask CSERA what our unfunded liability was, the number would change. You see, so when you're trying to look at the big picture and figure out how you're going to pay this, and CSERA is banking on 7.75% return on their investment, when they fall short, it becomes our obligation. You never want a situation where you go out for bond financing, when you have no idea what the number is going to be next year. So there are a lot of broken pieces to this system, and I'm all for trying to fix it. But I can't fix it all on my employees' backs or the ratepayers. So I'm trying to strike a balance by eliminating the cash out of vacation and sick time, so I can alleviate the 26 to 38% on top of what they would normally get for spiking, which we've done. Jerry Brown also made his decisions about spiking. So now you're looking at a workforce who may have worked 20 years, 25 years, looking forward to a pension which isn't going to materialize, plus there's going to be a cap on what they can earn.
You mean because they were counting on the spiking?
That's right. Plus, Jerry Brown put a ceiling on the salary that's going to be pensionable for these employees in the future.
For new employees.
That's right. You see, so now you've got a situation where you're accountable to the public, you're accountable to the employees. And how the heck do you do that with such large numbers? How do you keep your employees whole? How do you keep the 55 employees that can retire from walking out the door? 24 employees have already walked since last July. I don't want to ruin the reputation and the quality that Central San has. The 14 years of meeting our MPDS permits is incredible, and it's a reflection on the quality employees we have. You see, so there's huge risk to watching them walk and not taking care of them and not easing this into their lives. So I have a lot of concern about that. I do understand where you're coming from. This has all been a surprise to a lot of us. And now as it gets peeled back, we're seeing that it permeated the state of California public employees, not just Central San. But my goal is to fix it, make the district whole, to make our employees whole, and proud to be where they work.
For the record, I don't think I know of any other non-public safety system, pension system, where the employer cost has hit 60 cents on the dollar.
That's probably true. I really don't know.
It's probably triple the state average. Okay, Dick?
You know, if you look at it from the individual employee's point of view in terms of being able to cash in a lot of sick days that have been accumulated over decades, and you see some numbers. There was an employee who cashed in $145,000 worth of days that he could have taken off. But if you look at it from the district's financial point of view, the accrued actuarial unfunded liability for those days right now today is about $4 million, which when you compare it with the size of the district and the size of the other unfunded liabilities is not insignificant.
The unfunded liability for the unused sick days.
Sick days, and my understanding, sick days and vacation days.
Okay,
Absences.
that's a separate liability than the pension liability that's associated with the spiking, correct?
That's correct.
In other words, you have, just so we're clear what we're talking about here.
Yes.
What you're talking about is the value, the cash out value of that.
The unfunded cash out.
The unfunded cash out value of those benefits, of that sick leave and unused vacation.
Yes.
That's distinct from the unfunded liability created when those numbers, when they receive that cash, and those numbers are applied to their pension.
That's
correct?
Right. That's correct.
Okay. So the unfunded liability is really much more than $4 million.
Well, it hits twice. It hits once when the employee retires and the district writes a check to him or to her, and then it also hits every year thereafter as that pension is paid, because it's used to calculate the amount of the pension. You asked earlier, how did they get in this position? It's interesting that for 2 years, the district chose not to raise the sewer service charge because the economy was terrible, worse than terrible. But at the same time, they had a terrific opportunity to get very low bids to do some of the capital improvements that They had planned for some time, so they borrowed $50 million at an advantageous rate to use to lock down some of those bids, which I think was prudent. The question now is, what do you do about the huge unfunded liabilities that are going forward for both pensions and the Cicera number, which is highly unreliable because it's subject to 5-year smoothing and it's a 2-year lag. So you really...
So do you think it's high or low?
Excuse me?
So do you think that number's high or low?
I think it's higher in one respect because of the assumption of 7.5% return, which I think is unrealistic if you're making very conservative investments. But I think it is possibly lower because the market has been wonderful lately, and I don't know where that money is invested.
Whether if it's a 2-year lag, the first year wasn't so great.
You're right, but currently, when the administration in Washington changed, the Dow Jones was at 7,000 some odd. Today it's at 14,000 some odd. So there have been enormous gains for people who were invested in the right places. I don't know where the Cicera investments are, so I can't tell you.
And how does that measure against where the Dow was 6 years ago?
6 years ago, I'm trying to think where 6 years ago. I think the Dow was at about 7,500 6 years ago, and today it's 14,000 and change. That's a pretty good run. But as I say,
where was it before? It was at 7,500.
Well, it was 14,000 at its all-time high, 14,000 and something at its all-time high at the end of the Clinton administration, early in the Bush years. I'm not sure the exact date. But the market's been very good to me, but then I'm not making the kinds of investments that I would expect to be made by a pension fund.
So what does it mean if the market's going down and up like that?
Well, for Cicera and for the district, there's a 5-year smoothing. So you don't have an accurate number of what your unfunded liability is being given to you by the district. Plus, they're assuming that their future earnings are 7.5%. And as far as I know, about the best you can do with very highly secured debt today is just under 4%. And so 7.5%, if I could get a 7.5% annuity, I would take it in a heartbeat. But there is a lot that has to be funded. Part of it is to structure the future pension so that it works better than it currently does. But the other part of it is keep in mind that the district currently charges its customers a very low rate compared to everybody else in California, and especially in the Bay Area where costs are high. And we have the district has a very young infrastructure. So unlike San Francisco, where you have 120-year-old pipes in the ground, the district has much better condition. They run television cameras through all their pipes and know where the weaknesses are rather than just arbitrarily replacing the oldest pipes. It's a pretty well-run district, and I'd like to be part of ensuring that that continues. And as I say, I'm impressed with the board work in the past. I'm a major fan of Mike McGill, who isn't running, who isn't on the ballot this year, because I've seen him in the past. I served with him on the JFK board, and he's an extraordinary person. You can see his fingerprints on a lot of the good things that have happened in the last 6 years. I don't know if I've answered your question.
Paul?
Can you restate the question for me, please, just so I'm sure that I answer the right thing?
I appreciate that. My question to the incumbents was, how can we have confidence, given you were around when we got into this mess, that you'll be able to get us out of this mess? And I guess the question to you guys is, how do I know that you'll be able to get us out of this mess?
Well, I think for starters, it's incumbent on the board to understand the operations of this very contentious issue right now. The question of pensions has been raised statewide, nationwide, and it is really an issue that has to be addressed. The unfunded liability issue is one that changes with every year based on the returns that the retirement systems receive, based on the smoothing that takes place. And so to say today it's $180 million is not to say where it's going to be 10 years from now. And so I think we do have to recognize that the actuarial reports that are done, we have to question maybe some of the assumptions that are included in the actuarial reports. The 7.7% return on investment, currently I know this year PERS's return was only 1% or less than 1%. But we're talking about the smoothing over the entire life of the remaining life of the retirees. And so we're looking at a long-term investment. We have to understand the long-term nature of those. And quite frankly, the best way to deal with this is to have a strong board of directors.
Talking about smoothing over the entire life of the retirees. Could you explain that comment, please?
Sure. The 7.7% return that's identified by the board and by the retirement board is one that's over, it's not over just 5 years. It's over the lifetime expectancy of a retiree.
Okay, but that's the assumption rate. That's not the smoothing.
I understand. The smoothing is over 5 years to see where they are.
The reason I was questioning this is you said the smoothing was over the life of retirees.
Okay. So we're looking at a long-term return on investment, not just a short-term return on investment. So what the rates are today, whether they're 0.5% like LAIF is, or it's 1% or it's 4% in the market, it's a longer period of time that we have to look at. And the number is going to fluctuate. You talked before how things are going like this. The unfunded liability is going to go up and down based upon the return on investment.
Let me ask you a quick question.
Yes.
If Cicera achieved a 6.5% return over time, what would happen to the unfunded liability?
It would increase. The lower the interest rate, the higher the unfunded liability. And that's just...
And we all understand that if you fail to hit the 7.5, or actually in their case 7.75, I believe, that the unfunded liability goes up, not down.
That's correct.
Everybody understand this at the table? Okay.
And the flip side of that is if it exceeds that ever, like it did in the 80s and the late 70s,
right,
the number goes down. And so that's really the issue where you're drawing your line like this. The ups and downs really affect the unfunded liability. And the way that's going to have to be dealt with that is you're going to have to look at staffing. You're going to have to look at the benefits that are provided. I agree with your assessment of the benefit load is too high at this point, and we have to look at that. We have an opportunity now with the retirements that have taken place and with the unfilled positions to try to deal with that. It's going to take a very strong board to be able to deal with this issue because, quite frankly, at this point, we have to negotiate contracts with the employee unions. And so they're pretty strapped in. I know they're in negotiations right now. They're trying to make significant progress on things. It's my understanding that currently they're not going to deal this year with the health benefit, and that's a significant portion. It's almost as large as the retirement pension cost. And so that has to be dealt with in addition. I think it's going to have to be a strong board that's willing to negotiate hard at the table to deal with fairness for the employees, fairness for the ratepayers, and a collaboration between those two to get us out of this process. But it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take a considerable amount of time in order to get there. And the unions are going to negotiate hard because they don't want to lose anything. And again, it's going to take a strong board to deal with the issue.
Okay, so let me ask you, and Barbara, I believe it was you said, I think you said we were close to in the labor negotiations.
Yes, sir.
How close are you?
Last best and final. And the vote is due in the next couple of days. At least that's with MSCG. And then we're going to wait on Local 1, but I have a feeling that Local 1 isn't at the table. They are so far apart from where we are, and their salary requests for increases are not something that we really can entertain.
So to be clear, when you say you're close, you're not close to a resolution with labor. You're close to either an imposition or something like that.
We have a last best and final offer for MSCG, and I believe we'll get an agreement with them. And it is our hope that Local 1 will see that and also know what's happened with pension reform in the state, and realize that that's probably where we're going to be, and we may need to go to fact-finding if they don't understand MSCG's compromise.
Jen, you raised your hand.
Yeah, two issues. A couple of things Barbara said earlier I'd like to address, and one of them being that when you asked the question about depuoling, I think it's important to know that I disagree with Barbara on that. I think that the depuoling was a good idea, and quite frankly, when you find out that when they did depuol, albeit Cicera comes up with different numbers consistently over a long period of time, that was when the first bomb hit us, I'll call it, that we're looking at $18 million. And when that happened, this is well over a year ago, that we consistently got late and what I would consider inaccurate information to the board, and where I suggested in several board meetings to see if we could do something else, whether it's PERS or our own retirement, because the system is, for a better choice of words, convoluted, meaning it's extremely complicated. And I know you've done a lot of work with it, but for somebody to 100%...
So why was depuoling a good idea?
I think, depuoling's a good idea because everybody should be paying their own fair share. I don't think the county or Arinda or anybody else should be paying the district's unfunded liability or liabilities for their retirees. I think that burden should be 100% the district. And when that happened, I'll speak for myself here, but I was for that. That was one of the big bombs that got dropped, that, okay, well now we got this liability here, we're going to have to take care of this, because to me, we're responsible for our own people, not anybody else. And again, I agreed with most of what Barbara said previous, but when she said you were close to negotiations, I disagree. It's contentious. This is one of the hardest, this is the hardest negotiation I've been through at the district. We've been picketed. We've filled our boardroom with probably 100 people, which I've never seen. It's tough. I don't think we're, from what I've seen, anywhere close. When you're putting out last, best, and finals and doing fact-finding and arbitration, that's not a good sign. And we're trying to get through it. And as Paul indicated, this is a long-term thing. This isn't going to get fixed overnight. And with the 5-year smoothing, the depuoling, our unfunded liabilities, we've got a lot of work to do. And we're addressing it. This isn't something that's taken lightly at the district by anybody on that board. And we're trying to address those issues and do it, in a fashion where we keep quality people. We've had a bit of an exodus lately. We do have some voids. We're trying to fill them, and you have to fill them with people that can do that job and do it right. It's one of the highest regarded districts in the state.
Paul, let me ask you, was depuoling a good idea?
I think it is. It's better to understand what your total responsibilities are. I would agree with what Jim said in terms of the pooling that took place before. Having been at Delta Diablo with our responsibilities to the retirement system, we could not get good numbers either. And while in most cases, depending upon what your benefit and retirement obligations were, you couldn't tell really what the unpooled liability was.
Then let me ask you, Dick, was depuoling a good idea?
I'm sorry.
Was depuoling a good idea?
Yes, of course it was.
Because?
Well, it's an additional level of certainty in an area where there's a whole lot of uncertainty.
What do you mean it's an additional level of certainty?
Well, if you know what your portion of the bad data is, at least you can start from that point and move forward. You still have other areas where you don't know what the actual numbers are. But I think the district ought to be responsible for the pension and other liabilities of the district, and the numbers ought to be as clear as possible. And depuoling helped in that process.
May I respond, Dan?
Yes.
The reason that I felt depuoling wasn't a good idea is because the numbers were going to be a surprise, and they were. And then after the first surprise came the second surprise. And yes, I agree it's best to know, but what we found out was the numbers changed, and they did nothing but increase. And so I think that it would have been in the district's best interest to have had some prep time for doing that, but it happened all at once, and then the numbers changed. So we were trying to figure out what it really was, because we got two different sets of numbers. But yes, I agree, it's best to know, but it was a double hit. And also
So I'm confused, was depulling a good idea or not a good idea?
Yes, it was, but it was very expensive.
So, I'm sorry, I interrupted you, Paul. You were starting to say something, and I went down the line on depulling, and you were going to say something, and I'm not sure what it was.
Yeah, it has to do really with the board member obligation and responsibility, I think. As a board member, I think it is your responsibility to understand and evaluate the critical areas inside your budget, inside your operations, and be able to ask important questions with regard to those things. I don't think it's the board member's responsibility to be on the board and wait to receive information. And I've been a relatively detailed person in my life and everything that I've done. And I think as a board member, there is a fiduciary responsibility to ask questions about the highest and most critical elements of any budget as you go along. And so I think this is an issue that probably many years ago should have been discussed, and the board members themselves should have some knowledge and information on. And if they don't receive it, it's incumbent on the board member, I think, to ask, as this is one of the largest single pieces of the budget that Central San has. And so I think as a board member going forward, I would really look for those kinds of details and try to understand what it is that the background on these things are and why the numbers have increased so much, why the numbers are where they are, and try to get that information from staff.
Jim, how's compensation for the district compared to other districts and other comparable agencies?
Our salaries are middle of the road, and our benefits are at the top.
And
that's what sets us over, above and beyond everybody else. We've had
so
several.
What's the total? I mean, if you put it all together, total comp, where do you rank in this?
We're at the top, because we've had several actuarials done that. Again, it's almost like the unfunded liability, where you get different numbers back every time that is upwards of 12%.
Upwards of 12%. What is that?
Over the mean.
Okay. Barbara, would you agree with that?
Our salaries are actually 22% higher than anyone's in the area. And in fact, other special districts...
Than anyone's or than the average?
We're 22% over the ones that were surveyed in our area. And in fact, a lot of districts out there will tell you they would really appreciate it if Central San salaries were lower, because they're doing labor negotiations as well, and we're used as a benchmark. So our salaries are awesome, really, and our benefits are.
Dick or Paul, you want to comment on that?
I'm sorry,
Do you want to comment on that?
Oh, do I? Yeah, I think that the ideal situation would be if your rates were in the bottom 20% and your compensation was in the top 20%. I have nothing against paying good people well and giving them good benefits. I have a problem with abusing systems and gaming systems. But I think also the district has made a lot of good decisions over the last 5 or 6 or 7 years that I've been able to see. I can't go back much further than that. And you have to remember there was a fairly serious leadership change. I think it was around 1999 where the board turned over and the general manager changed, and a whole lot of things that should have been known were not available then, and they've been coming to light ever since. And like I said earlier, if the three incumbents were still running for their seat, I wouldn't be running, but there is an empty seat.
You have nothing against paying good people well.
That's correct.
Okay. He said 12% above the mean. You said 22% above all the others surveyed.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm not prepared to put a number like that.
Okay, I know you're not prepared, but
no, I'm not
but
prepared.
Assuming
at
either
any
of those numbers are true, what is the implication of that for paying? Your comment about nothing is paying good people well.
Well, I have no objection to being in a position where you can afford to pay good people well. The board's first obligation is to make sure the district survives, and the second obligation is to make sure that there are no environmental problems. And then I think you have to worry about all the other stakeholders, including the ratepayers.
Let me ask you, do you think the district right now, what do you mean by well? Let me ask you that.
Sounds like, how do you define is?
Yeah.
I think good people ought to be paid generously so that they feel that they're being treated with dignity.
Okay, let's define generously then.
Well, I think people ought to be able to earn enough, skilled people ought to be able to earn enough to live in the community that they serve and to be able to plan forward for education of their children and their own retirement.
And that all sounds fine, but that's kind of loosey-goosey.
Okay, let me give you an example.
What would you use as the measurement, the yardstick for determining this?
I think you have to look at position by position, but if you have nothing else, then you go by comparing yourself with other districts and other similar employees, people who do the same job at a refinery.
And what would you use as the benchmark if you collected that data? Where would you want to be?
Well, I'd like to be as high as I can, as long as it wasn't compromising anything else that was important to the district. Everything's a balancing act. But the district has done a wonderful job at keeping the rates low. And so I think going forward, you got to try and keep the rates as low as possible. From what I can see, they're going to go up primarily because of dealing with unfunded liabilities.
Well, Dick, let me ask you something then. You'd like it to be as high as you can, as long as it's not compromising. I just gave you some numbers that said that you have 3 years of unfunded of O&M as the equivalent unfunded liability, $190 or $80 million. Okay, I just gave you numbers a little bit earlier that said that the projections to deal with that mean doubling rates over the next 10 years. Is that compromising?
I don't think so if it's done right. I mean, I've seen
what's done right.
If the whole financial management, I've seen plans for the next 10 years of the district that call for rates to go at various different levels, and I think there are rates available to charge. The residential rates of what I've been able to look at that are going to remain in the bottom third, bottom half, and allow the district to pay off its unfunded liability.
The current scenario, as we stand today, puts current rates going from 371 in 12-13 to 701 in 21-22.
I don't know that number is fixed anywhere. If it is, I'm shocked. That's a forecast.
Well, you said you've seen this.
Well, I've seen five scenarios that have been considered by the board.
Right, but this is the current status quo scenario.
And over
scenario
10 years.
3, if you would.
I think I'd have to look at a whole lot of other numbers other than that to know whether that was reasonable.
Okay.
I think that from what I've seen, rates can be kept in the bottom third, and unfunded liabilities that are currently exist, including the bond debt, can be eliminated and managed, assuming that the numbers are correct, which, especially with the pension numbers that are coming out of Cicera, I'm not sure they are. I think the board can manage to do that gracefully, pay its people a reasonable living wage and get rid of the unfunded liabilities over 10 years or even less, perhaps. But a lot of it depends on what other people do, what the market does, and so forth.
Well, I have some numbers I can give you. Based on the 245 or 250 total employees the district currently has in funded positions, and based on the salary budget this year, the average salary for a Central San employee, the average across the entire district, is $110,000 approximately. My experience, salary only.
Salary only.
Salary only. My experience is salaries in the municipal sector generally are averaging between $60,000 and $80,000 currently.
Well, some would argue, though, these have more, they're more engineers and technical jobs in this
That's
district.
where I'm headed next.
Okay.
And so, yes, their numbers are higher because they have a strong technical support staff that's there. One of the things I think we need to look at is the staffing allocation and whether there are too many engineers and whether there are jobs being done that could be done by lower valued employees. And by that I mean employees that don't have engineering degrees but can do the work that's being done in an administrative way. And so we need to take a look at the staffing that's there to determine what can be done by other than engineers, and I think that will then reduce the $110,000 average cost down as we bring new employees in that have administrative skills and capabilities. We also need to look at the load that's being placed on the staff. I know they're doing most everything in-house now in terms of evaluating and looking at designing all of their own capital projects. Capital budget has been curtailed in the last couple of years based on the fact that it didn't have a rate increase. And so what are the engineers doing now that they don't have the capital projects to design? And I think we need to look at those things and look at staffing compared to the salary budget and try to look at better ways to manage and run like a business as opposed to run like a municipal government. And so I do think that the district has done a good job of being out in front in the industry. The question is whether going forward as a business they can afford that luxury of having a significantly professional staff the way they do.
Okay, so this question started with some salary survey data. Did you want to comment on that and what the implications are? The same question I asked to Dick when he said, I'd like to look at it, like it be as high as I can, as long as it's not compromising. What, 12%, 22%?
What I have not seen the salary surveys that have been done.
Well, let me tell you what the salary survey data actually says.
Okay.
Okay? Comparable to other sanitary districts and CCWD, it's my understanding, it's 12% above the mean.
Total compensation or
Total
salary?
compensation.
Okay.
Compared to comparable districts and municipalities in the region, a cross-section, it's 22 to 23%, I believe it is, above the mean.
Right.
Not again above the top, but above the mean.
Right.
What do you take away from that, and what is your yardstick?
What I take away from that is that we need to look at those things and determine how we can be competitive in the industry. And I know that in the last 5 years they have done things to cut down and be more competitive in the industry than they have. So they've been working on it over the last 5 years. The numbers I think are down considerably over where they were 10 years ago. And I think
numbers
the 12% or the 22%, if they had done a salary survey 10 years ago, I think they would have been higher than those numbers. They would have been up at the
actually
top.
the surveys that were coming up before were showing just the opposite.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm surprised because
Correct?
I believe
Were you
so.
not getting staff surveys before that were showing you guys were not among the top?
We typically in the past have not done overall surveys. What we've done is surveys in like an engineering department or a CSO employee, meaning in the field, guys guys and gals in the streets, and we'll do salary surveys for them, and we in the past have adjusted them accordingly to other districts and other municipalities.
My recollection is your former HR director told me about 3 or 4 years ago that the pension benefits and the spiking only brought you up to comparable
Yeah, Dan, I would be surprised by that. I know.
Well, I would too, but
in 20 years I've been here
Yeah,
in
yeah.
Contra Costa County.
Yeah.
I concur with what Barbara said,
Yeah.
that Central San was always the earmark that
Right,
everybody
benchmark.
wanted to get to, the
Right.
benchmark. And so to hear that being said, I find hard to believe, because I know when Delta Diablo did our surveys, Central San was in the top 2 or 3, always. And so that's why I say 10 years ago, I think they were in a different position than they are today. I think they have been working to try to cut that down and be more in the group as opposed to being at the top of the group. I don't know what their philosophy is in terms of where they want to be. I do know, as Jim has said, they don't do comprehensive salary surveys. And that's partly, I think, because they know where they are and they know that they can recruit good people. And so that's been important to them. And so they don't think they need necessarily to look at what everything is around them. I think that's an area that needs to be looked at by the board of directors and a philosophy established about where they want to be in that mix with everybody around them.
Where do you think they should be in that mix?
I think they could be probably at the 60% level, just above average at the top end, and that makes them competitive in the industry. It's going to take a while to get there. Looking at the staffing levels and the mix of responsibilities that various positions have in the district will help with that, but that's going to be a comprehensive evaluation of all the staff.
Dick, what do you think of that? You said you wanted to be as high as possible, and Paul said 60%.
I'd be uncomfortable stating a number as a target. I think that 60% may be fine in some areas, but I would like to see the district run in such a way that their financial condition allowed them to pay a good wage to the people who work for them. And I think you have to look at it by segments. I'm generally opposed to outsourcing. I've seen it used to bring salary data down where a particular company, in this case, looked good on its salary survey because they were outsourcing. I saw engineering work being outsourced to local engineering companies who were sending the data to India to have the actual engineering work done there, back to work the next morning and get emails telling them what the design parameters ought to be.
Barbara,
So,
what do you think of that 60%?
Oh, you know what? I don't agree at all to putting a number on it, and I've heard actually members of my board say their target is 70%, but I have a hard time relating that 70% to the reality of salaries and benefits. You see, so I don't connect them together.
Well, 70% would be 70th percentile of total compensation, as I assume what you're talking about.
I think it's high.
You think that's high?
I do. I think it's very high. Yeah.
So you would want to move it down?
Yes. I
Okay.
think I would like to move it down, and I'd like to have it also still on the competitive edge in our industry.
So what are you thinking then?
I'm thinking not 70, but I'm also thinking that if you target something that's 60 or 65, you've got to weigh that according to your expenditures and your rates at the time and the business you've got going on the ground. It's just not a number that you throw out arbitrarily.
So you'd like to pay more than the 70 or the less?
Less than the 70.
Okay.
Right.
Jim?
I'd like to pay people what they're worth. We're living in Central County processing 45 million gallons of sewage every day. That's a lot of work. As Paul indicated, we are heavy on engineers. I've said that since I got on the board. I was the one that voted to get more people on the streets, cleaning sewers, reducing backflow, or what's the word I'm looking for?
Overflows.
Overflows. Thanks, Barbara. Overflows, which we had, I think, the lowest ever last year. It's worked. It's paid off. We put some more boots on the street. But I think that people need to get paid what they're worth, as I indicated before. And I hear numbers of 60%, 70%, 80%. I think the salary surveys, whether you go to another sanitary district, whether it be in LA or Timbuktu, it's helped to use other public agencies, but it's always like for like of what an employee is doing. Experience, knowledge, what are they doing, what is their workload? To put Dan Bornstein's job against what you think is the same Dan Bornstein job in Los Angeles isn't necessarily the same job. So those are only guidelines of what to pay people.
Mm-hmm.
I think you need to pay people good money to stay, to have a long term at the district, and you know, we've got issues now that I think we're addressing. That you know, you could be paying somebody 85%. To put a blanket out there that, you know, we're only paying the 60 percentile. My personal opinion is 60 percentile is way too low, because you're not going to keep people around the district. They're going to have to be driving to Davis every day to find a home to live in. And we typically at the district have kept people their whole career. I've seen numbers on it, and I can't think of it right off the top of my head, but you know, these people are staying 20, 25, 30 years. They're staying for their career. We had a hell of a turnover this year. You know, people leaving. We've got to avoid.
Why did you have the turnover?
I think a bunch of people jumped out because of retirement and spiking.
So it didn't have to do with the compensation amount.
No.
It had
Oh,
to do-
no,
It had
no.
to do with that.
But
So you were mixing apples and oranges.
Yeah, I don't, and we've lost a few people, since I've been there, a few people over the years that have gone somewhere else or done something else. Who knows what their whole reasons were, but no, the compensation has been very good down there, and as a result, we've been able to keep very good people. Is the compensation too high? Yes. So, but to put a percentile on what we're going to pay people, I think it is a road to having, you know, substandard people trying to do jobs that could be very, very important to the public safety.
Folks, I want to thank you all